Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Winston Innovation Lab Common Sense Media parent presentation on supporting children in the digital world. I am Michele Heimbauer, Associate Director of the Winston Innovation Lab, and also with us is Jacqueline Barastani, Winston Innovation Lab's Special Project Coordinator. We are so excited to have this opportunity to directly share the benefits of our long-standing partnership with Common Sense Media, to answer your questions, and to help you build your own understanding of digital balance. Before we kick off, I want to give a special thanks to Claudia Ayesh, our Winston Prep New York's Parent Association President, for suggesting we coordinate this presentation. Thank you, Claudia, for all of your help in developing this event. Thank you also to all of you who submitted questions when registering. We did our best to integrate your questions into the presentation, but feel free to submit additional questions in the Q&A or chat, and we will hopefully plan time to respond to your questions towards the end of the hour. If you have questions at any point after the presentation, or you'd like to discuss your child individually, please feel free to reach out to me or your campus leadership via email or phone. I also want to say that we are so grateful for the people at Common Sense Media and the work they are committed to doing. Same as the work we do at Winston Prep, Common Sense Media's work is research-driven. Their resources and research support our teachers and leaders in their efforts to help our students learn how to develop the skills needed to navigate the digital space independently. The work that Common Sense Media does is very much aligned with Winston Prep's social-emotional framework of the qualities of a sustainable and independent learner. The QSIL skills of self-regulation, self-reflection, self-advocacy, social responsibility, social communication skills, resilience, problem solving, and time management and organization are embedded in their lessons, resources, and research. So we value our partnership as our philosophies are so well matched. The emphasis on balance and independence is vital to our students' long-term success, which is what makes this partnership so special. That said, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, Lisa Solomon. Lisa is Common Sense's Senior Manager for its Connected Schools program based in Los Angeles. She's been with the nonprofit for 7 years and is deeply involved in its work, providing support and resources to educators, parents, and caregivers around raising kids through the lens of media and technology. Prior to joining Common Sense, Lisa worked as a TV producer for 2 decades in Asia at CNBC and CNN International. She's passionate about media literacy and working with kids to create civil discourse around tough issues. Lisa is also a mom to 2 college kids, both of whom keep her up to date on the latest online trends. It's all yours, Lisa.
Thanks, Michele. Thanks to Jacqueline, and thanks to Claudia for getting this started. I am so excited to be with you guys this evening. I wanted you to know I can't really monitor the chat in real time, but I would appreciate you putting things in there, whether it's comments or questions. And I know that our Winston team will be looking at those and sending them to us. But we did review all the great questions you sent in ahead of time. So I'm just going to start with a little statistic, because I understand your community loves research and statistics and things like that. But the bottom line is technology is here to stay. And you may have seen this stat from the World Economic Forum that 65% of children will end up in careers that don't even exist yet because of all of the things that are coming our way, like AI and all the amazing technologies out there. And I am here tonight as a parent advocate to help support you all in your journey in raising your kids around media and technology. But I just leave you with that little stat because one of the reasons we're so interested in using technology in a smart and responsible way is because, as we like to say, we're always soaking in it in so many ways. But I also want to thank you all for being here live or watching this video. Just it shows your commitment to helping support your kids around these tough issues. And just take a deep breath because it's going to be okay. and we're going to be here to have conversations. This is never the sort of one and done conversation. This is the first of many that you will have, both with your amazing school and with Common Sense, and I'm sure with your kids as they get new and different technologies and go through different ages and stages. So I always like to start with a really quick icebreaker, because we're trying to make this sort of a positive discussion. A lot of the questions were about screen time and making sure our kids don't get into inappropriate content and things like that. But I'd just like to start by framing there are some really cool things our kids are doing. So I'll start, and maybe you want to put some things in the chat. You're also welcome to chime in. But something that my kids have used technology in a really interesting and creative way is over the pandemic, my daughter got really into crocheting, and she was able to learn how to crochet and get some tips and tricks from watching YouTube videos. So that to me was a really positive way and use of tech. And I encourage you to share. I don't know if Michele or Claudia, either of you, or Jacqueline, either of you have anything to share in this space. If not, we can see if there's any discussion in the chat or move on. Oh, there's a nice one.
Sorry.
There's a,
Oh, sorry.
no, someone wrote, my child is an only child, so technology really helps him be with others. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Someone else wrote, looking up definitions of words when reading. I love that too. Flight aware to track his cousin's flights. That is, I use TrackAware all the time too. I love these. These are wonderful. Anyone else have anything they want to add?
I'll say for my 19-year-old, it's a great way for him to learn about the world from varying perspectives. So I really appreciate that. For my 7-year-old, she is in love with the iPad video camera. And so she writes films and video films them, and then is learning GarageBand to add sound effects and music. So I wish I had that kind of creative outlet when I was her age. But both of them, I love that they can FaceTime their grandparents who live almost 2,000 miles away. So that's a real positive too.
Yeah, we have some other really good ones in here about Cash App helps this child monitor his monitor debits and credits. That's great, real life skills. Access to creative digital tools. So what I'm seeing a lot of, and what we'll talk about in a minute, is one of the things we're really trying to do with our kids is encourage them to be creative consumers of media, not just passive viewers, right? And use it in creative ways to do things that are super cool and can help them grow and learn. So I love all these answers, and I really appreciate you all taking time to share with us. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Common Sense. You can put in the chat, very familiar. I don't know if any of you have used our ratings and reviews, but I'm going to show you a little bit about the site in a minute. But just, I got a heart there. What you have to know here is we're doing more than just ratings and reviews, but most families and parents find us for our ratings and reviews of all things media and tech, including books and apps and video games and movies. And we're really trying to make the world a safer place for kids around tech accountability, what companies are doing with kids' data and things like that. Oh, thank you. I'm getting some love in the chat. Love Common Sense, been a go-to for us as a family. But I also want you all to understand too, we do have a whole K-12 amazing suite of education lessons that I do know that, as Michele said at the top, we're very much in lockstep about how we feel about media and tech and giving our kids the tools to use it in a really responsible, interesting way. So just to give you a sense of what we're up to. I did want to also thank Winston, because we've been a partner since 2016. I run a national program of more than 1,000, mostly independent schools who help invest in what we do, and then we provide curated resources like this event this evening. So we're so grateful for the partnership and working together to support your kids both at school and at home. So this just gives you a sense of some of the added benefits. You may be seeing tips throughout the year from us. We also offer live webinars, and in the next slide, I'll show you what those have been about. And then also, please do go check out the site. And if you have any questions at all, please go to your Winston prep team, and they can always connect you if you have additional questions about the site or what this partnership is about. One of the benefits is sort of first access to these live parent caregiver events. And the most recent one we had was on November 8th, talking with the women you see on your screen about ways to help kids around social media and help pull them sort of out of social media rabbit holes. And you will be receiving this deck with the recording so you can watch at your leisure. And I've also added on the right side of the screen many of the other talks we've provided for the past few years. And there's a playlist also at the bottom of this slide where you can go in and watch any of them in your own time. So we're going to have another one coming up in very early February, which are for those of you out there, if your kids don't have any mobile devices. We are going to talk with Devorah Heitner and some other very interesting people about the skills your kids need before they get a mobile device. So stay tuned for that. I want to start with just some research for you. Everything Common Sense does is based on research. And we have a whole research portal that you can go see, play, and go through all the details in your own time. But just, we do these studies every 4 years on first a 0 to 8 cohort, and then an 8 to 18 cohort. And we've been doing these for many years just to watch trends and see what our kids are doing and love mostly online. And this is from our most recent, what we call a Common Sense census for the 8 to 18, the tweens and teens that came out sort of right after the pandemic in 2022. And the top line is not going to surprise most of you, is that our tweens and teens, the most thing they love the most of all is YouTube and watching videos, whether it's on TikTok or YouTube. That seems to be their favorite activity. And if asked one platform that they could not part with, YouTube was it. They said that's the one they would not give up. The one other bit of knowledge that I thought was really interesting that came out of this is social media use is growing among tweens. And if you're all familiar with COPPA, which is the Children's Online Protection Privacy Act, you're really supposed to be 13 or plus to get into any of these social media platforms, whether it's TikTok or Instagram. So if kids are getting on this earlier, it just means that I use with my kids, they had to wait till they were at least 13 or we were breaking the law. But we do know a lot of kids are getting online a lot earlier and using a lot of these social media apps and platforms. And the only thing I'm going to say about that, and I can expound on it in a little bit, is, if you know your kid is getting on this younger and younger, we just know developmentally they may not be ready for all the bits and pieces that come with being engaged in social media. So I just think we as parents and caregivers have to be ready to support them in that process, because there may be some features in it that they're just not ready to get into. So I just want to raise that point. And also, obviously, our kids are on screens a lot more than they ever have been. So I also wanted to share some Pew research as well. But first, just a little scene setter here. We do a lot of social media focus groups with kids. And just to remind them that they say, all the grown-ups think that I'm addicted to tech, but I'm not. I'm really addicted to my friends. And I know I get frustrated if you're watching your kids online, but they're not just doing everything negatively. They're doing this to stay connected and stay in touch with their friends and create a community that's become very important to them in many ways. And the Pew research sort of supports this. I'm not saying there's not red flags and there's not things we should watch out for, but I am just reminding everybody to just take a look. For example, this is from 2022. And again, the link is at the bottom of the slide if you want to take a deeper dive later. But 54% of teens in this said it would be hard to give up social media. But most of them have said that this is a really important way that they stay connected with their friends and stay in touch. So some of the times you may be thinking they're just mindlessly scrolling, but chances are they're communicating with friends and finding community either at home or also in the greater world as we know it. And like what Michele said about finding different perspectives on what's happening in the news or in life right now, there's so much going on. It's really difficult, and it's good to have support, but also to know where our kids are going for their news and media and make sure it's a trusted source. So coming back to Common Sense research for a minute, we just in September finished a small study looking at kids who did have phones and looking at a focus group and seeing how much they were using their phones, what they were doing on them, and how much they were being pinged throughout the day. And these results were released on the Today Show Again, you can watch this segment and you can access the whole report here, but we really wanted to understand with the youth perspective what our kids were doing with their phones. And just a tiny bit about the methodology, it was not a huge sample, and it was not iPhones, it was only Android phones, because we were not allowed to get content off Apple phones because of data permissions. All the parents knew we were doing this and provided permission, but what it was looking over several weeks about what these specific kiddos were doing on their phones. And this just gives you sort of a snapshot of an 11-year-old boy. You can see at the bottom the time, and then up on the left the date, and the red is related to gaming. So these are sort of very typical male-female stereotypes in some way, but it proved out that 11-year-old boy was gaming. So most of the time you see is these red splotches that he was gaming most of the time, whereas we looked at a 16-year-old girl here and pulled this out. The majority is pink, which relates to social media. And then there's some light blue as well, which are streaming videos. So to me, that's like YouTube, TikTok, but it's really an interesting sort of snapshot into the lives of our kids and what they're doing. What we did also find though, however, is a lot of these platforms send out a ton of notifications. And I know many of you might have kids, younger kids as well, but we're framing it so you kind of see what's coming and things that you can think about if and when you're going to give your kids devices if they don't already have them. Although I think most of the friends that signed up for tonight do have kids that already are on tech of some kind, because it's not just phones anymore, right? It can also be iPads. It can be any type of media you're on. It used to be we could separate them out now, but now it's everywhere you go and everywhere you turn. So the highlight here was really, there are so many notifications our kids are getting. It can be so distracting for us as adults as well. I know I've turned off all the notifications on my phone, and I am a news junkie. I've also turned off all the news notifications on my phone. So now I'm trying to be much more intentional about when I pick up a device, what I'm going to look at, and set my own time limits. But just to understand, if it's hard for me, think of how challenging it'd be for our kids, because there's so much coming at them all the time. What I also thought was interesting is a quarter of these notifications came during school hours, and 5% during school night hours. So what I know is we're all trying to do is raise healthy kids. And part of that is making sure they get a good night's sleep, because there's proven that sleep relates to positive mental health. So anything we can do to try to get into some of these settings on the platforms that our kids might be on and turn off or amend, or at least see what the notifications are, I just would highly encourage you to do so. That's my little PSA. And really, this is called Constant Companion, because we've seen that we all have our phones with us so much of the time, as do our teens. And our younger kids are always, excuse me, I don't know if this happens in your house, but trying to get an iPad or trying to borrow your phone if they don't have one. And there's always a real pull for this. So it starts younger and younger, as you all know. And we just have to kind of stay on top of it and set guardrails, especially when they're younger, so that when they do get older and they do have their constant companions in their pockets or their backpacks, they have the ability to manage it beyond us just setting limits or trying to shut things down. You know, we're trying to work on impulse control and teaching our kids to sort of, once they leave our homes, as mine have done recently to go to college, that they'll also practice smart and healthy habits when they're outside of your house. So we have seen smartphones can help and hurt sleep. Some kids say they have to go to sleep with their phone or they need music. I'm always a big proponent of, I have my prop here. You know, you can have just a very cheap little $5 alarm clock that kids can have in their houses, in their rooms, as well as parents, not necessarily their phones. So you can try to take that out of the equation to get a good night's sleep. But teens are getting savvier about managing their relationships. And we are really hoping that a lot of these platforms, as we've actually seen recently with some of them, are coming out with sort of more teen, kid-friendly platform features where you can turn things off, and it's going to help our kids have a little more support around this and not have putting it all on them to have to manage, or us as parents as well. So just a few reminders as to why is all this technology, whether it's a phone or an iPad or anything, so important. It's because of the attention economy, right? There's features like autoplay, auto scroll, game design. When a lot of the phones came out, you had to intentionally pick which video you were going to watch next, for example, on YouTube. And now I do this all the time late at night. If I just start watching, I have not turned off autoplay. It will feed you the next video based on an algorithm and what you're watching. Especially with younger kids, I would highly suggest you do go in and turn off autoplay, which you can do if you go into the settings. I have some features and resources for you later. So a lot of parents will say to me, I don't know this technology, or I'm not good at looking at the platforms, or I don't know how to set things up. These are pretty straightforward, and you can just go into the settings, and Common Sense at the end, I'll show you, has some really great ultimate guides, which go over everything from Instagram to Snapchat to YouTube that you can use to help you if you're not sure what to do about how to play with some of these privacy settings. But anyway, it's set up. It wants us to go to the next, it's a game design. So it's always wanting you to level up. It's always want you to spend more hours watching your phone. And then also, as we just discussed, the notifications keep you hooked, right? If you just count yourself as an adult, the number of notifications you get, and if I'm having a conversation with Jacqueline and then my phone is beeping, am I going to continue focusing on her? Or I'm going to look at my phone. You know, there's been really interesting research done that if you're at lunch with a friend and your phone is even just on the table, that you're less connected. So I always try to now put my phone in my bag. When I'm sitting across from someone, it just makes you be more present. But these are all very distracting for our kids. The pop-ups, the red dots, the streaks, you know, they're trying to do snap the streaks when they're texting each other, all sorts of things. So just keep that in mind. And why does it feel so addictive? It's the dopamine hits. I'm sure you've talked a lot about that. Whenever you get a like or something great online, you feel good. It gives you a dopamine shot. And then the algorithms, as we know, are getting smarter and smarter in feeding us things we might be interested in. And as we mentioned a little earlier, just everything's about leveling up. If you get to a certain level, then you can, it's a gaming philosophy, and they're trying to embed that in a lot of the platforms that we're on.
And Lisa, I just want to add a quick note on dopamine. A lot of the current research is showing that dopamine isn't necessarily connected to things that people enjoy. It's more kind of habit forming and the kind of basis of addiction. So it's something that kind of prompts people to go for more and keep going, but it's not necessarily for enjoyment. They might be not happy with that kind of relationship, but their brain is telling them to keep going.
Well, and I love that, Michele. I really appreciate, you know, jumping anytime, because we do talk a lot of common sense too about try to talk to your kids about how things make them feel. And I know it may sound basic, but to your point, exactly. A lot of times at a certain point, they don't feel so good about being on this all the time. And I see that mostly in middle school. By high school, a lot of our kids have sort of figured it out, and they're much better at just shutting things down. Or when they go out with their friends, they don't want to take pictures. They don't want to be sharing stuff. So you're correct. It doesn't always make you feel good. And I think that's really important to note. And also, I always do. So we talked a little bit about this, but we want our kids to be creative online versus just passive scrolling, as well as us adults. So I put my little crochet person, because that's something my kid has made a ton of. These are all over the house during COVID. But I also want to suggest, as we're heading sort of into the holidays, look at things like StoryCorps, which I love, where you can have kids co-engage with their grandparents or older people, maybe around Thanksgiving or the holidays, where this is a great site, and it gives you a soup to nuts guide on how to interview people about their stories. And so you can do this in an online fashion, but it's encouraging conversation. And I just think it's really nice to find some of these great ways to co-engage, especially if you may have grandparents in your life that wonder why your children are always wanting to be online and it's a constant source of frustration. Pull up something fun like this that's creative and get them talking. So that's just a little bit of an idea for the upcoming holidays, and just in general, is to find things that are creative and fun and can teach as well. Because a lot of the tools we're using at school they're just that, they're tools to encourage learning, right? They're not the end. They're to support everything else we're doing in the classroom, just like we can do this at home with certain things like what you're learning to do. Show me how you've learned online. Show me what's new that you've come across. So it's really all about balance. And I've seen a lot of questions a lot of parents are asking, Is my kid addicted? I can't seem to get the phone off, all these sorts of things. And I just like to give a little bit of a pause and just remind everybody that it's sort of an overall balanced picture, right? If your child is healthy and sleeping, if they have good friends, even just one or two, that's really important. If they're engaged in school and doing well, and if they have one other hobby or other things they're interested in, whether it's sports or something like Dungeons and Dragons, someone mentioned in the chat. And then again, are they having fun and learning with their digital media? So if you see that the balance is out of whack, and yes, it can happen, then you may at some point want to talk to a professional. But I just would remind everybody that it's part of an overall balanced picture of use. And sometimes, you know, if your kid's been at practice for a long time and they're exhausted and they just want to zone out for a little bit on a phone, you know, to me, that's okay. They're not on it all night. And I also would suggest, and I'll say this again and again, but really considering taking phones and any sort of devices out of the bedroom at a certain point at night so that our kids can get to sleep. I know they have to do, especially the older kids have to do homework, but you definitely can find a happy balance. And I just share this slightly tongue in cheek, but hope is not a strategy. So if we're really frustrated with our kids' tech use, we can get involved and help frame that, just like you do with anything else, right? That you're doing when you're raising your kids, is we have to talk about our expectations as parents and teach essential skills, which we call digital literacy or digital citizenship, which I don't really like as a term, but it's a shared vision of what we expect our kids to do at home and how much time to be online. We can always role play. If you're just talking to your kids about how to learn how to text, or they're part of a group chat, you can start a text with them and go back and forth and see how it's going. And I always think about that lesson I was told to do with my kids, you know, don't answer the door to strangers. And I would talk to my kids over and over about this. And then you'd have someone come to the door and knock on it and they'd answer the door. They're like, hello. You said, we just talked about this. And it's sort of that practicing of skills, I think, is really important to see what would really happen in the moment. And you can do that if you're texting them or other ways to sort of see how it goes. My also suggestion here is to teach your kids how to make a phone call versus texting. So like pick up the phone and order a pizza or do something that's engaging where they can actually use a phone. Because I even find with my older kids, they'd always much rather text. And I say, just pick up the phone and talk to them about the right form of communication for the right message, right? So if I'm in a big fight with Michele and we keep texting back and forth, at a certain point, it's probably a good idea that I pick up the phone and just talk to her or meet face to face and say, hey, can we work this out? That's a much better way to solve a conflict than to throw it into the cyberspace. And also play for the long game. So really our goal is to help teach our kids how to use these technologies and these platforms so that they can handle it on their own. I'm not saying we should not start with training reels and setting up a walled garden. But as your kids get into middle and high school, there should be more of a gradual release instead of trying to shut everything down or set up, in my opinion, ways to filters and things like that, because they're always going to get around filters. Or they're always going to go next door and visit their friend who may have access to things that you don't want them to have access to. So you want to start these conversations when they're very young about what's appropriate, what's not, and that if they find things that don't feel right or are not appropriate and they know it, there's not shame involved, that they can come talk to a trusted adult and you will talk them through it and explain it and have a conversation. Otherwise, they're more likely to sort of go dark, and we want to have conversations with them. One other thing to mention on this slide is whenever I used to go to these talks, I'd then come home and sort of spew all this information on my children for 20 minutes, and they maybe heard the first minute. So I also suggest, like, take this information, think about it in your own lives, and then you can parse it out in nuggets where it seems and feels appropriate. And there's so many life lessons now, whether you're listening to the news or anything else, where you can sort of touch on some of these topics.
I just want to add one quick thing.
Sure.
I read it in one of the Common Sense Media reports, or maybe the parent tips. It was somewhere, but it was mentioned that parents' role is considered a media mentor. And I love that idea that we're there to kind of support and help our kids grow and develop those skills that are required for that self-regulation that you mentioned. You mentioned self-reflection and understanding how it's impacting us, and social responsibility and understanding perspective, social communication. So that just we're mentors rather than kind of keepers. And then another thing that I had read that has something to do with what the previous slide was that when we're talking to our kids, we want to think about approaching those conversations with curiosity rather than judgment. And I found that to ring true and be really important.
That's so great. And I'll share a personal experience. When I lived overseas for a really long time, and I would post pictures of my kids so friends around the world could see them. And once my daughter was sitting next to me, and she was probably 10, and she said, "I don't like that picture of me that you're about to post on Facebook," which, by the way, is, the kids hate Facebook. They're over it now, but I still use Facebook. And she said, "I'd like you to take that down." And I said, "Okay, do you want to pick a photo you like better?" And she did. We went through my photos. She picked a photo she liked better. But that was, to your point about modeling behavior, we were doing it together, and she didn't want me to create her digital footprint of photos that would be out there. So I took it down. We picked one she liked, but that started a lifelong conversation. She will now tell her friends, she's now 19, if they post a photo that she does not like, she will have them take it down. But she will also ask permission to post photos of her friends as well. So that's like a great realistic example of how you can talk to your kids, say, "Hey, I'm going to post something. Are you okay with this?" And then just have a discussion around it. So that's modeling behavior. Just as is, there's a stat that our kids learn to drive. If you're in a driving city, I know many of you probably are in Manhattan, but our kids learn to drive by watching us by the time they're 5. So basically what we're always reminded of is our kids are constantly watching what we're doing and how we're doing it, right? So if we're on the phone at the meal times or different times of day when they want your attention, you want to think about narrating what you're doing. Like, "I'm on the phone for the next 5 minutes because I have to do some work, and then I'm going to put it down. And then I'm just going to be with you." And I learned so much of these parenting talks because a parent the other day said, her partner has a very hard time. He's working in a different time zone, so he's always on the phone during meal times. And they've just created a family ritual where before they're going to all have no screen time, they light a candle. It can be any time of the week. And during the time when that candle is lit, whether it's mealtime or just 20 minutes, nobody can be on their phones. And then they blow it out and they move on with their day. It was so simple, but I thought it was really a good way to sort of think about things. So a few things, and I can show you the site in a second, but we have these great free family tech planners. Why do I mention them? They are for kids in different ages and stages, as you can see, 2 to 8, 9 to 12, 13 plus. They are free. You can download them, but they're living, breathing documents. And I just encourage you in a calm space sometime to sit down with your kids or your child together and talk about these and write down, this is just the first page, but we have family expectations. You can also amend them to your own family and add your own items to this, but they're really important in my view, just to set your expectations and get them codified. And then you can print them out and put them around your house or, by the dining room table. And also then when your kid gets a new phone, or maybe you get a different device or a different service, like you're signing up for Netflix or something, you talk about how you're going to use it and what the rules are in your house. So it's always changing and you can always update it. But I think these are really a great free. There's a lot of them out there. They're all free. Just take a look at them. And then also, I did read some of the questions. If you as a parent don't know how TikTok works or Discord or Snapchat or Minecraft, please just go in and check out these family guides. So I'm going to, for just a second here, see where I can do this. This is slide 25. I'm going to actually share my screen for the website, just so you guys can see what it looks like. And so there's 3 pieces at the top, and I just want to make sure you can see those. There's for parents, for educators, and our work and impact. So I always suggest to go to for parents. because this is all the ratings and reviews, but I did also want to remind you there's all these parent tips and FAQs. So these are all the different platforms where you can find, let's pick TikTok. If you're not sure how TikTok works, it's our ultimate guide. There's a little video, but then it will go over everything. So what is it? Is it safe? What are TikTok challenges? Does it have parental controls? So you can figure that out. Should I be concerned about security? I just think these are really great to have, and they're pretty much, they go through all the major platforms that your kids might be loving. So I suggest you check those out. We also have by topic. So if you want sort of screen time or cell phones or social media or online safety, you can also go under the parent tips and FAQs and see sort of all these different articles that we've been writing that can help you, and you can sort of also filter it by age and stage. You can filter it here by your ages. If you want big kids or little kids, you can filter it by topics, which is great. There's life skills, there's mental health. We're doing a lot more on mental health as well. So recently, with everything going on in the news, sort of how to talk to kids about violence, crime, and war, we span the gamut here. So you can talk about how to have kids have a healthier social media experience. So I just want you to see that so you can kind of get a sense of everything that's on the parenting site. We also do have the educator site you can check out. But these are just great in terms of apps. You can look up our best lists for apps, which is everything sort of best apps of the year, educational apps that don't need Wi-Fi or data. A lot of them are free so that you can go ahead and also get a lot of content here that is free to use and can support you. I love things like this, cool online museums for curious kids. You can do some really cool outings that are virtual as well. We did get a lot of questions about parental controls. So I'm not saying parental controls are bad. I'm just saying I would use them more. One, I would always look at the parental controls and the privacy settings on the apps. But if you're trying to wire up your house or use Bark or some of these other great platforms out there, just know that they don't contain everything. And I always suggest you start with the free options. So for example, I use Apple products. I'm not promoting one or the other, but I think their screen time and their family sharing is really important. Even to this day, my kids have to get my approval because I still pay for their phones if they want to download any apps to their phones. To this day, makes them crazy. But we started doing it when they were very young. So if they're trying to download, for example, Yik Yak, which is an anonymous app, any anonymous apps never end well because it means kids can share stuff about other kids and they don't have to put their names. It usually ends in a pretty much in a world of hate. So I suggest that you take a look and set up some of these controls. Google has their own, as do all the Androids. So these are all great options. Parental controls are handy, but they're not perfect. We mentioned that a bit earlier, and that kids can find ways around them, or I can go over to Jacqueline's house and get on her phone as well. So to Michelle's point about starting conversations with your kids when they're younger and continuing as they go older, what did you see when you went to your friend's house? And talking to other parents. If I'm sending my kids to Michelle's house, I can say, I'd really prefer they not play Minecraft for 3 hours. You know, can we limit this? And just come up with your expectations when you talk to your parents of your kids' friends so that you can be together and aligned. Or I would prefer they not watch scary movies because my child doesn't like scary movies. And again, you can look up common sense and see what's scary in certain movies and decide what's most age appropriate for your children. And then again, we're playing the long game. So there's a lot of articles, and I've linked it down here to how do I decide which parental controls to use. You can go in and read that more thoroughly if this is an issue for you. And what can we do to be helpful, right? And again, I know we're talking to parents. You guys have different ages of kids, so I'm apologizing if it's not necessarily getting to your specific question, but I hope at least we're giving you 2 or 3 nuggets to take away, and we'll definitely meet again. But a lot of this is just reminding us to really talk about these things. Don't always assume everything your kids are doing online is a negative. Just start a conversation with them if it's possible. And I always start my conversations with, my job as a parent to keep you healthy and safe, right? Everything you do online, just like you do in real life, I want to make sure you're healthy and that you're safe. So you can show them that you understand they love the tech, but talk about your concerns and hear from them what they love to do most. And then you can talk about dangerous behavior, or if and when they stumble across inappropriate content, that you are very much hoping that they will come talk to you or someone else in their world, because they will stumble across inappropriate content. And my other top guidance for parents is always not to scare you, but to practice the face you're going to have when your child finds porn. Because my daughter was in 5th grade and I was like, what? And we were doing a research project together, and all of a sudden on licorice, and all of a sudden the screen we were Googling filled with some live porn. And so I wish I had practiced in the shower or the bathroom where you can look at your face, how you're going to remain calm, and have that discussion. Just, okay, this is what we found. This is not okay. And then you can kick off, depending on how old they are, you can tell them as much or as little as you feel is important. That's up to each and every family. But to have those conversations so that they are given your guidance and your values baked into how you're seeing some of that videos, and get them to think. Remind your kids that not everything they're seeing online is ever real. This is becoming more and more important with AI and deep fake videos and all the ways that a lot of this content can be manipulated. So just, you can have conversations with them about that. On the site, there's some really great new AI literacy lessons from Common Sense for educators, but I found them for parents, they're just as important to watch, and they're really great. They sort of give you short videos on what's generative AI and how you can talk to your kids about it. And then, acknowledge peer pressure with your children. Like we said earlier, our kids just want to be connected. They just want to find community. And that's one of the reasons that all of this is catnip to them. And just maybe ask them what's their favorite YouTube personality. What do they like to watch and why? And you can get more of an insight into what they're doing, and also show that you're interested without being judgmental at that point. And then, just like we said, stay up to date on what your kids are doing online. I like to do what's called an app walk every so often, especially with the older kids, which is really just an application walk. So you're just sitting down and seeing what is downloaded on their devices and what they're doing with it. And try to do it, you're not angry, you just want to understand what's happening and make sure maybe there's not any phishing software or something that's been downloaded inappropriately that they didn't mean to do. But you should do an app walk and just understand what they're doing most of the time on their phones. And then just back to Michele's point about modeling the behavior we want to see in our own kids. We really can't underestimate the power of that. You may not know about it at the time, but they really are watching, and they do really find it's important. I even model behavior around Alexa and Siri for younger kids. I don't know if you've ever heard younger kids screaming at Alexa or Siri, and it's kind of horrifying when you sometimes say, wow, maybe we could say please, or we could say thank you, or maybe we could talk to Siri in a different way. So these are just some small teachable moments you can think about in modeling behavior.
Sorry, Lisa, I just want to add
Go
on.
ahead.
In addition to the modeling that we provide our kids and what they kind of take in, I also want to talk a little bit about that peer pressure. And yes, it is strong, especially in the adolescent age range. But the research shows that they are also hearing what you're saying to them. So even if they seem like they're shutting down or they're not in agreement, it still sticks with them. And it might not be in that moment or anytime soon, but eventually they do have your voice in their head to help them make good decisions. So I want people to not give up and really continue talking to your kids.
Yes, and it does sink in. I completely agree. And so again, these are just some other bits and pieces. Just address underlying causes just before you just grab the devices away, because then you've lost the conversation. Here are just a conversation starter. I've noticed you prefer to stay in your room or online, and I'm curious what's going on. And keep at it, keep chipping away at it just to see what's happening. We've mentioned this before, but if you can, keep devices out of private spaces. I did see some questions about trying to get their kids to sleep, or they're streaming all night long. And you can try some of these in week-long experiments. Like, I notice you seem really tired in the morning. This is more for middle school, high school kids. It may be that you're watching TV all night, which I understand, or you're binging a show. Can we just try for a week? Let's turn everything off at a certain time, and you pick a time and just see how they feel after a week, right? And it may work, it may not work. It's this idea of do-overs, which are okay when we parent. But just to try things maybe in week spaces, that's how you can start to change a habit and see how it goes. We also talked about the message and what we're trying, how we talk to our friends, that online friends are very different than face-to-face friends, which we know, but it's sometimes good to bring up, and then how you are communicating with your friends, right? We talked about texting group chats versus calling someone or seeing them in person. And then it's hard to model this behavior sometimes, but to bring online back into overall balance in your house, right? So as a family, we're going to set limits. That's where this tech planner can come into focus, and you can all sit down, and you'd be surprised if you talk to your kids. They sometimes will say, "You're on your phone all the time," or "You're always on Instagram, mom," or don't, you want to hear what their feedback is about you, and you might be surprised and they see you on your phone a lot more and they prefer you or not. So it's really a give and take. And the power of saying, "Wow, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize that was bothering you at this time." It's always at like 11 at night when your kids all of a sudden want to talk, and you're really, I've been asking you all day. But take those moments when you can. And if you are driving your kids around, I know some of you are in cabs a lot, but the best times I always got intel is when they were in the back seat with no phones and they couldn't see me, but we always had longer conversations and I got a lot more information. So just find those moments. Now, do you want to go through these, Michele, or do you want me to? We can talk through them just a little bit.
Yeah, Jacqueline, do we have any questions?
Not right now, but we should definitely carve out a couple of minutes to see if anyone wants to put any in the chat.
Maybe just
Well, I'll do
at least one of them.
Yeah, I'll just briefly go through this. So Common Sense, in collaboration with the Harvard Graduate School of Education's Center for Digital Thriving, has created these really great, they're called digital dilemmas. And they're thinking routines, and they're part of our education series, but we've taken them and we think they're great for parent conversations, right? So we're giving our kids a thinking routine, sort of to identify what's wrong, how does it feel, imagine what you could do differently, and then say how you could fix it. That sort of feelings and options. And I'm just giving you that as a platform to see. We brought one that we liked. I don't know if either of you want to read it or I can read it. Doesn't matter. My child expressed to me, and I know this is more 4th, 5th, and 6th grade when group chats go crazy. My child expressed to me that one person in a group chat is saying mean things about another person in that same group chat. My child wants to say something to the person saying mean things, but doesn't know how. So how might you support your child in that situation? And has anyone been there, or does anyone want to put in the chat if they have any ideas? This is a group think. There are no right or wrong answers. And I'm looking at the chat. I would love to see if anyone has any ideas here. Or if any of your kids are in big, giant group chats right now. Okay, well, I know everyone's tired. So we just wanted to give you some tips about how to think about group chats, right? One, I always suggest before you're allowed your kid to get into them, you have conversations. Yes, great idea. We practice what to say. You can absolutely role play. And I've also said when my kids were younger, you can also walk away from a group chat. Take a pause. It's that stop, breathe, and think. You don't have to jump in right away. So there's some great things about group chats. Homework questions. My kids use it a lot for where's soccer practice. There's a lot of ways to get information, and they can be really supportive and positive. Birthday wishes, and staying connected. So you may have little groups that work on these group chats, and it's very positive. However, we know that kids can also say things that are unkind, and it gets going in a very, as we saw in the dilemma, a not so nice way. And kids can start spreading rumors, and it's very hard to then have these group chats spiral and you can't take them back. And it's not a way to solve problems or conflict resolution. And it can be exclusivity among friends. Because I do know when my kids were growing up, some kids you can knock people in and out of them. They can feel very excluded. They can cause hurtful feelings. So I love the idea of practicing what to say, and also talking to your kids again, if about screenshots, if things that are coming up in a group chat are not okay, anyone can screenshot it and save it. The whole idea that everything online is done in pencil, a pen, not pencil, right? And if this child is concerned, there's all this pressure to be an upstander now. And what do you do if I see something mean that someone's written about somebody else? Is, again, have those conversations with your kids that they should come to you for help if they feel they're over their skis and they don't know what to do, right? And you can help them walk through it so they're not feeling so alone. I think it's really important, because once you're out there, and sometimes they don't remember to take a pause. And these are just some tips and tricks to think about group chats. Is, as they're smaller, encourage your kid to stop and pause and think before they post anything. Especially for younger kids, I do encourage you to monitor it. You can say, I'm going to sort of see what you're talking about, and you can screen share so you can see what they're getting into. I think you have to be very honest with your children if you are monitoring their messages and things, just so that you're creating established trust between you guys. But I think it's fair to say, you're on this platform. Once you prove that I know you can handle this in a responsible way and act in a kind and responsible way, we'll monitor less and less. It's sort of a gradual release strategy, that using technology is a privilege, not a right. And it's something you have to learn how to do. I always say, to drive, kids need a learner's permit. And then they have to drive for a certain amount of months before we hand over the keys to a car to drive on your own. And I really think it's the same thing with a fully loaded smartphone or a fully loaded iPad with full access to the internet. We want to set our rules and expectations before you hand that over. So if there is a group chat, again, encourage your kid to speak up to you or someone if there's something inappropriate. They have the ability to walk away. It's not the right place to solve conflicts. And then if they do not feel safe, you follow up with a grown-up. These all come back to conversations, right? They all come back to open and honest conversations with your kid. And to role play how a kid can leave a chat if it's not going well and it makes them feel really uncomfortable. So this is just sort of one digital dilemma, and we can do more in the future. But I do want, go ahead.
Sorry to jump in and interrupt you, Lisa. We did get a couple of great questions in the chat, so I just wanted to make you aware. Maybe we can save a minute or two to.
Oh no, let's do it, because I want to make sure everyone gets it. We only have a few minutes left. So which questions do you want to pick, Jacqueline?
Does it work if I read aloud?
Sure, please.
So here's one question. Do you have more concern for our children over one form of media over another, i.e. video games versus social media versus YouTube, TV and movies, and so on?
Yeah, and you guys jump in too as well if you want. But my opinion is always this. What is your kid interested in? Are they being creative versus passive consuming? I love video games. My daughter and son played Zelda for years. And Zelda is a game where they had to work together. There wasn't so much leveling up as they were solving things. And so I don't really, as long as you know what they're doing and if there's a creative element to it, right? Michele earlier was talking about her kid using GarageBand. Like, that's super great. Social media, again, what are they using it for? And YouTube, are you just sitting there scrolling and autoplay is on and you don't know what's coming next? And as parents, we don't know what they're watching, right? Or is it something that they're actively engaged in? I don't know if, Michele, you have something you want to add there, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, I just want to add for Zelda and all RPGs, role-playing games. I love video games as well. And those RPGs, the research shows that they really help support development of visual spatial skills. So there's that little nugget that I'd like to share.
Yeah, and they're not all bad. But again, whether you use common sense or something else, look and see what the games are about. Look and see what the violent content is. Look and see what we think about it, because then you can make that decision and decide what you want to do.
And it depends on your kid and what they can handle. I know I have two kids. One kid could not watch movies. They were too long and too overstimulated. Another kid cannot watch TV shows because she just wants to watch the next one and the next one and the next one. But a movie she's great with, she could sit, watch, and move on with her life. So it depends on your child and what they can handle and how it impacts.
Completely. Yeah, I have a gamer and then I have a social media person. And I did see an interesting question here about neurodiverse challenges. I just want to say one quick thing about AI. It's getting a lot of flack. However, I do know, and you guys are specialists more than I, that a lot of AI is really helpful in helping kids if they have any learning differences as well. And there's some really interesting things to watch out for. But I do think if you do have a child with impulse control issues or certain things, sometimes social media can be overwhelming. And in terms of maybe more positive ways to build online social skills, do you guys have any insights into that as well? I think it's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, the role play piece, practicing what you will post or what you can say or how to respond is a really great way to approach that. But that impulsivity, that's self-regulation piece that we work on at school, the same strategies that are working for them at school during their day can be applied to that online world as well.
Well, and I was going to say, please rely on your teachers and your amazing academic community. You know, you're in this wonderful school and getting all the support. So definitely do talk to each other, but do talk to the educators and administrators that are supporting you and your families. And then I just have sort of my laundry list of top 10, but I think we're almost out of time. I do want to let you know that you will get the deck, and we do have resources at the end of the deck as well that are hot linked. So I just want you to know that we are all here to support you. This is not a one and done conversation, and I just want to thank you all for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you, Lisa, so much. We really appreciate your time and energy to share all of your knowledge with our community. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will share the recording as well as the deck with links, as well as anything we mentioned that wasn't in the deck, so that you can look further. And feel free to reach out to me or your campus leadership to continue the conversation. Thanks, everybody.